we're going to be launching an inquiry about Bud Light and InBev, and it could be something that leads to a derivative lawsuit filed on behalf of the shareholders of the Florida pension fund, because at the end of the day, there's got to be penalties for when you put business aside to focus on your social agenda at the expense of hardworking people.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has asked for a review of Bud Light's parent company. In a letter to the head of Florida's State Board of Administration, DeSantis said in part, it appears that AB InBev may have breached its legal duties to shareholders by associating the brand with radical social ideologies.
Bud Light has faced major backlash over an Instagram ad featuring trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney. Republicans accused the beer company of pushing an agenda, and the Bud Light fell from its spot as the top-selling beer brand in the U.S. for the first time in more than 2 decades. An Anheuser-Busch executive called the situation a, quote, wake-up call. In June, the company's chief marketing officer said the situation has forced the company to think about how it can reconnect with customers. So this is an interesting move from DeSantis's part. I think if we see any kind of overturning of Citizens United because of a lawsuit, it's going to be because Ron DeSantis attacked the political opinions expressed by either Disney or now Anheuser-Busch. I think he single-handedly is the guy leading the fight against the Citizens United ruling when it comes to this kind of thing.
Yeah, this lawsuit, I don't really buy it. He's basically arguing that Bud Light and InBev have breached its fiduciary duty to shareholders by making a decision that tanked the stock price. But I think that this is a fundamentally different thing than some of the other Republican fights against environmental social governance policies. For example, in West Virginia, they're looking to divest from companies that adopt ESG policies because they say that ESG policies don't provide the most profitable returns, the best returns for companies, and therefore that's a violation of their fiduciary duty. But in the case of the Bud Light situation, I don't feel like this is a company deliberately using politics as a means of tanking their stock price. I think that this was clearly a case of them hiring a bad marketing director who made a poor decision and was kind of a one-off. That doesn't mean that conservatives have to automatically trust Anheuser-Busch again. It doesn't mean that they have to start buying it again. But this seems like an individual error on behalf of a company that the market is correcting to address. The market has spoken on them not liking the Dylan Mulvaney advertisements. But to take it a step further and view this in the framework of the ESG craze, I don't think is necessarily right.
Yeah, it seems to me that DeSantis is trying to claw back some of the rights granted to corporations by that 2010 decision in Citizens United, which gave corporations the ability to express their political opinions. Now, it's been most controversial because they've done so through major sums of money in political contributions to campaigns and PACs. But also in the case of Citizens United, that ruling made it so that individual shareholders cannot sue a corporation because they've been denied the ability to have a say in what political opinions are expressed by the company, and that is solely, the rights of the board of directors, not the shareholders. And so DeSantis's argument there goes directly against the legal precedent set by Citizens United. And I don't think Ron DeSantis's political camp, the Republicans that donate to his campaign, would be in favor of Citizens United being overturned. So I think he's getting into some treacherous legal territory. But it's pretty clear that he does believe the state and the government should be allowed to influence what a corporation can or cannot say, and that corporations should not be able to make political statements. This is, his second major bout with this exact issue, the first being with Disney. And so it's really interesting coming from the DeSantis camp that this is a hill he's willing to die on.
I think that this is just a politically calculated move to try to increase his support in the Republican nominee polls, honestly, because 2 months ago, or whenever these ads first dropped and people started boycotting Bud Light, if he had come out then and maybe announced something related to Bud Light or something he was going to do in Florida, I think it would have been better received. But now it feels like too little too late, and like he's just grasping at straws and trying to catch the current online moment for conservatism. And I think that's been a central part of his campaign that has caused him to falter, is that he seems to be chasing trends in the party and in the movement, as opposed to having an organic platform, of having actual original ideas, of proposing solutions to problems that maybe even people haven't thought about yet. But chasing trends is not how you build a successful campaign. And to be totally honest, to me, this sounds like another Jeff Rowe harebrained scheme out of Axiom Strategies, where he said, hey, what are conservatives mad about right now? Oh yeah, they don't like Dylan Mulvaney and Bud Light. Well, you got to do something about that, Governor, or else you're going to continue to tank in the polls. Because we've seen him time and again, Jeff Rowe that is, come up with really horrible ideas for campaigns. One of his first moves when he was hired by DeSantis and left the Youngkin campaign was to try to build a major ground game in South Texas. And the thinking behind that was that DeSantis performed really well with Hispanics in Florida, so therefore he should try to capture the Hispanic vote in South Texas. Well, those are two very different demographics, right? In Florida, you have Cubans and Puerto Ricans, and in South Texas, you have Mexicans and various other Hispanic and Latino groups that don't think the same way as Hispanics in Florida. And so it was like a vaguely kind of maybe racist idea, and also one that just seemed politically inept. And so if this is just another Jeff Rowe idea, I wouldn't be surprised, because he has sort of single-handedly, or at least his company has, killed the DeSantis campaign with the various strategies that they've employed throughout this process.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The type of Latinos that come out of Cuba that go and live in Florida are definitely those who have been the people who were the elites who are exploiting the Cubans, where now they are no longer popular, nor are they in power. And so they had to flee to Florida to start a new life. That's very different from the refugees coming over the southern border in the United States. And so to think about Latino voters as if they're a monolith is a common problem of political strategists, unfortunately. But a Miami Cuban is very different ideologically than South Texas voters. It is the case that Democrats are losing a lot of migrants that have come over the southern border from Central and South America. And that's because they haven't done anything substantively to make the country better for migrants, for them to have a path to citizenship, and to make the country better for working people. But that's a problem across the board for voters in the United States. But I think back to DeSantis specifically, I think you're right that I'm giving him too much credit by assuming by doing this, by waging this fight against Anheuser-Busch, he's making some broad moral implication about his stance about corporations having political rights or the right to express their opinions politically. I think it is probably true that he's trying to meet the moment, but a real leader would make the moment, would make some statement that's important policy-wise. Perhaps it wouldn't be one about Citizen United, but something else going on in the country. Instead of following the trends, I think that could be exactly why he's falling in the polls, because that's not what a leader does. And I think people are pretty aware of what a leader looks like. And it's not someone who tries to hop on the latest trend and capitalize on the moment. It's really someone who makes the moment. And so seeing DeSantis fall in the polls isn't surprising when you consider, it's a failure in marketing. Also that he has to write at the top of his script when he makes public appearances, be likable. I don't think he's someone that will do well on the campaign trail for several reasons. But really, it seems that a lot of candidates are chasing viral moments, and DeSantis is failing to get his with this Anheuser-Busch thing.
Yeah, and again, I understand the impulse from conservatives and DeSantis in particular to try to stem ESG policies in state pensions because they don't lead to the biggest return on investment for shareholders. I think that's an understandable concern to have. And there's a bunch of consumer groups that are pushing for more states to adopt those kind of policies. I mean, a perfect example would be if a state pension fund is investing heavily in a windmill company that maybe is still kind of getting on its feet. The U.S. doesn't have the infrastructure yet for wind energy to be the biggest driver of, or the biggest supplier of energy yet for Americans. And so that wouldn't necessarily be the best investment in terms of a fiduciary duty. You could argue it might be the right moral investment, but if you're talking about trying to get a return for firefighters, teachers, et cetera, maybe not the right time for a state pension to do that. And that's what some of these policies are geared towards. But again, I just think the Anheuser-Busch situation is different. I don't think that this is a case of them trying to appease the ESG gods or whatever. I think that they just had a dumb moment, and the CEO in charge of the company doesn't understand how to fix it and keeps trying to pander to different customers, and they continue to fail because of that. I don't see a fiduciary duty issue here, at least not from my perspective. We have to wrap there, but we'll be back with more Rising.